Back on the record on the Read matter.
All right, a side issue in the Read matter. The defendant and her lawyers have been excused. Counsel, identify yourselves, please.
Sure. Adam Lally for the Commonwealth, Your Honor.
Aaron McLaughlin for the Commonwealth.
All right, good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. Timothy Bradel on behalf of non-party Aidan Carney, who for the record is present in the courtroom.
Hey, does Mr. Carney want to sit with you?
I think he's okay right there, if that's all right, Your Honor.
All right, so Commonwealth, so I do want to say a question before we begin. Commonwealth, in your motion to exclude an individual charged with witness intimidation in connection with this case from the courtroom during the testimony of certain witnesses, before we begin, are you advancing the concerns of the DA's office or the concerns of the witnesses themselves, or both?
Both, Your Honor.
Judge, if I may, I'm sorry to jump in, but just if I may, I
Sure.
do have what I think is a pretty substantial procedural objection. Maybe I'd ask that you just make a quick bifurcation of the issues here, and we can address the procedural issue before we get into the substance of the motion.
Sure, I'll hear you.
We could. Thank you very much, Your Honor. Your Honor, so the record is clear, because we may need an appellate record in this case, but I was here in the Norfolk Superior Court today, completely unrelated to Mr. Carney, my client, as in the other matter. I was here today on the matter of Commonwealth versus Tylee Curry for a motion to suppress.
Which is a case that I am in the middle of
Right.
that motion to suppress with you.
Exactly. I was fully focused on that matter and had no notice whatsoever that the Commonwealth was in the Read matter was seeking to exclude my client as a journalist from this courtroom. The first thing is that, and I know the court has a job to do in terms of ruling on this motion, and that's fine. I ask that the ruling be that it be denied on procedural grounds. The procedural grounds are, Judge, that there's been no service of process whatsoever on a case where the government is seeking to essentially trample all over my client's First Amendment rights as a journalist on 15 minutes notice. I know you gave me the thing 15 or 20 minutes ago.
It's more than a half an hour, but I understand.
All right, well, you get the point. This is not something that I can process and absorb and make any sort of cogent arguments on the merits of the motion on that time period. I'm sure that the court respects that. I'm trying to address it as best I can, but I think that the procedural issues here should control. And here's the procedural situation, Your Honor, that the government filed this 6-page motion. There's a footnote 2 that refers to them serving this motion on May 8th to the Associated Press. Why they couldn't just pull up my email and serve me is an open question that I'd like an answer to. So they can serve the AP 2 days ago, but they can wait and not even serve me with the motion when I get here to court today on a completely unrelated matter, I might add. So there's some funny business going on here. And there's been nothing but funny business from where I sit from the Commonwealth on Mr. Carney's matter. Here we go again. So I don't appreciate that from counsel, from the Norfolk County DA's office, number one. Number two, Your Honor, Mr. Carney has covered this case and written about 350 news articles on this case. He has developed evidentiary scoops on this case that have added to the quantum of evidence. He's never caused a problem. He wishes to be in the galley of journalists like everyone else and cover the case. There's never been a problem whatsoever. This is more personalized retaliation from the Norfolk County DA's office against Mr. Carney. Another point, Your Honor, is that this matter, as far as the Commonwealth is concerned, is res judicata ×2. Judge Krupp in this very court addressed this exact issue about Mr. Carney covering this matter, being in the courtroom with witnesses that had a stay-away order. All the same people that the government is trying to have another bite at the apple with here. All these people, this was adjudicated fully with the Special Assistant DA before Judge Krupp, and Judge Krupp ruled against the Commonwealth. Judge Krupp said that Mr. Carney was able to be in the courthouse covering this case, regardless of any of these witnesses in the stay-away order. The stay-away order was exempted from Mr. Carney. Mr. Carney's presence in the courtroom, rather, was accepted from the stay-away order. So this is done. This has been adjudicated. It's been adjudicated again, Your Honor, by Judge Pomeroy across the street in the district court. One of these people associated with Mr. Carney's detractors, Ms. Gattani, has taken up with the Commonwealth and sought charges and sought a restraining order against my client. Judge Pomerol recently, as recently, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we were across the street, Your Honor, seeking to vacate the order under the doctrine of unclean hands because this plaintiff keeps trying to contact my client while under a restraining order. Putting that aside, the ruling in that matter, Judge, was another ruling in support of Mr. Carney's First Amendment rights. It was another ruling that said Mr. Carney was not subject to the restraining order in any court of the Commonwealth. The reason we brought that motion, Your Honor, was because these same witnesses that the government here is again trying to advocate for their own personal issues, those same witnesses somehow took up with this plaintiff across the street, Ms. Gattani, brought her to court here in prior Read proceedings to kick out Mr. Carney because at the time she had an operative order against him. Mr. Carney, to his credit, got up and left and got out of here. That situation was what we addressed across the street with Judge Pomerol. He agreed with us and said, you can go to court, you can cover this case. So number two, litigation number two, this has been established. Mr. Carney followed all proper channels. We worked with the SJC media office. He has a press pass. He's doing everything in accordance with all of the rules and regulations that are in place. He's been harassed, and we have it on video, by other so-called journalists on this case at the steps of the courthouse. And he just wants to be here. He doesn't want to be an issue in this case. He wants to sit here and cover the case. He's done his job. He wants to watch the trial unfold. And he has an absolute fundamental First Amendment right to do so within the confines of this courtroom and within the confines of time, place, and manner restrictions. He's followed everything, and he's here. We've gone through all of these hurdles, Your Honor. Mr. Carney triumphed, as he should, because it's the First Amendment that needs to triumph here, not any particular person. That's what he's doing. There's absolutely no reason for the government to sneak behind my back to interfere with his First Amendment rights. It's outrageous. On procedural grounds, I ask you to deny the motion for all of those reasons. If the court has some hesitancy to do so with respect to these procedural issues, I ask that you set a date give me 7 days or so that I can properly respond to this motion on the merits of whatever's in these 6 pages of the motion that I haven't been able to look at. Thank you for hearing me, Your Honor.
All right, sure. You wanted a response to your question from Mr. Lally on why you were not served, but the Associated Press was served.
That's correct.
If you talk about that in the procedural part of this, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. Simply put, Mr. Bradle, neither Mr. Bradle nor Mr. Kearney are parties to the case. I can't presume that Mr. Bradle's representation on one criminal case is going to extend to a motion of which he would be at best a third party on a separate criminal case. We are required under the SJC rules to serve it upon the Associated Press, which we did.
I think that's your record now, Mr. Bradle.
Thank you.
On the procedural issue, we have a jury out. I do want to address the merits of this as best we can. Mr. Bradle, at the end of this hearing, whatever I end up doing, if you want to come back and readdress it when there's more time, depending on how I rule, I'll give you the opportunity to do so. But I have to get this trial moving at this point, one way or the other. So I'm going to hear the Commonwealth on their motion. Then I'll hear you, Mr. Bradle, to the extent that you can respond. All right, Mr. Lally, I'll hear you on your motion.
Your Honor, very shortly, very simply put, this is an instance in which the Commonwealth is not asking that Mr. Kearney not be allowed to cover the case or that he not be allowed to watch the trial. What we're requesting is a partial closure of one individual. The legal standard for that is essentially a substantial reason. Substantial reason, Your Honor, being that Mr. Kearney has been indicted and has open cases for intimidating witnesses, specifically witnesses in this case. He has confirmed statements indicating publicly that his actions that he's taken in regard to those indictments were to prevent the case from ever going to trial, to intimidate those witnesses. Those witnesses will be called to testify in this case. What the Commonwealth is simply requesting is that he be excluded physically from the courtroom, not excluded from watching the trial, not excluded from covering the trial, but excluded physically from the courtroom while those witnesses are testifying from the stand.
The witnesses you told me have expressed concern. What do you say about that?
Yes, Your Honor. The witnesses have expressed concern. The Commonwealth is concerned as to his presence affecting their testimony or their ability to recall. For all of those reasons, the Commonwealth would submit the administration of justice and the witnesses being able to testify, as well as the witnesses' own concerns, are more than meet the test of the substantial reason for Mr. Kearney's exclusion during the course of their testimony.
Okay.
Your Honor, the witness's concern has no legal materiality under the law. So the answer that I have is, so what? The witness's concern, where does that fit into the law here, Your Honor? This matter's been adjudicated twice. Mr. Kearney has the right to speak on the case. He's gone through all the proper channels to be here. He is not in any way wants to or is trying to make any issue of his presence here. And he's just trying to cover the case as best he can. And this is just a personal vendetta that's been carried out by the Norfolk County DA's office against Mr. Kearney. This is where the court needs to hold the line on the First Amendment. This witness intimidation statute, Your Honor, is an absolute abomination. It is going to be struck down. It's just a matter of time. This is just a continuation of everything the special counsel's been doing to Mr. Kearney. Now the office itself is doing it. There's no reason for this motion to be allowed, Your Honor. There's no discomfort exception to the First Amendment, Your Honor. There's been absolutely nothing advanced, especially on an emergency basis, which is, I assume, why this is being done with no notice. There's been no establishment of any emergency. There's been no conduct whatsoever on the part of Mr. Kearney to justify this motion. I did happen to see some reference to the Chestnut trial about something to the effect of doxing a seated juror. That is false. Mr. Kearney wrote a story on a juror after the jury was discharged. There's absolutely no prohibition or problem or issue with that. It is absolutely protected conduct by the First Amendment. It is not in any way a grounds for this court or the Commonwealth to assert any wrongdoing against him.
So I can assure you I am not considering that incident in this. You all know I was the judge. I am not considering that experience in this motion.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further, Mr.
Nothing
Bradel?
further. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Bradel, I agree with you that Mr. Kearney is certified by the Office of Public Information pursuant to SJ Rule 119, and that he has a right to be here today. He arrived timely, and that he is registered. I have honored that 119 registration today, and I will continue to honor that. However, my role in this case, Commonwealth versus Karen Read, is to assure that the defendant's constitutional right to a fair trial are honored and upheld. And because of the chilling effect that Mr. Kearney's presence, I find, will have on the witness's testimony, I'm going to excuse him while the named witnesses in the Commonwealth's motion, Julie Nagel, Christopher Albert, Colin Albert, Michael Proctor, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, Brian Albert, and Yuri Buchanan. And the Commonwealth also today requested Nicole Albert because of the incidents that reportedly have been held at her home. I'm going to excuse him during all of that testimony. Now, in my media order, if you have it, I'm sure your client has it because they're handed out to the press. Under number 1, I say that anyone leaving the courtroom to the media during the trial proceedings may lose their seat and may not be permitted re-entry unless there is available seating. That will not happen to Mr. Kearney. I will not take away his seat today. For other witnesses who are not subject to this order, that seat will remain empty. No other person of the media will be able to take that seat in his absence.
Your Honor, one last thing, if I may, just came to me as I was standing here. Extension in same regard as to Nicole Albert for the address would be Brian Albert Jr., son of Brian and Nicole Albert.
It's for the same reason, so Brian Albert Jr. All right, so those are my findings, Mr. Bradel. It should give you enough to seek appellate action if you wish. All right, thank you for being here. All right, so I'll take a short recess. We can bring counsel back in and Ms. Reed back in, and we'll proceed with the trial.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
My name's Nicole Albert, Albert.
And where do you live? About how long have you lived in Norfolk?
About a year.
Prior to moving to Norfolk, where did you live? Where did you live prior?
Canton.
How long had you lived in Canton?
My whole life.
Now, the specific address, where did you live in Canton prior to your move to Norfolk?
34 Fairview Road.
How long did you live at that house?
About 12 years.
Are you married, ma'am?
Yes.
What's What's your husband?
Brian Albert.
Do you work?
He's retired from the Boston Police.
Well, how long was he in office?
About 30 years.
Do you have children?
Yes, we have 5.
How old are your 5?
Daughter's 28, and then I have a son who's 25. I have another son who's actually 23 today. And I have twins, a boy and a girl who are 20.
Your oldest daughter, what's her
Caitlin.
son? What is it?
Brian Jr.
Brian Jr., does he live with you currently? Your other children, do they live with you as well?
My oldest daughter lives with her boyfriend in Easton. And my son Brendan lives with us. He's just finishing up college, so he's graduating this month from college, so he's back with us. My twin daughter, goes to college, so she's home now for the summer, but she has an apartment in Bridgewater. And then the twin boy is in the military,
Which branch?
the Marine Corps.
Now, I could turn your attention to January 28th, 2020. Recall that day? Recall what day of the week?
The Friday.
At the time of January 28th,
Yes, I've been a part-time lunch lady for about 9 years.
you've since retired, is that correct?
I'm sorry.
You've since retired from that?
I haven't retired. I just didn't go back this past year, but
And around that date of, so January 28th, 2022, what, if any, significance was the next day of January?
January 29th was my son Brian Jr.'s 23rd birthday.
Over the course of that week leading up into the weekend, what, if any, plans did you make with reference to your...
He had mentioned he was going to get together with some friends on the Saturday night, the 29th, for his birthday. And I had said, okay, maybe Friday night, if anyone's around, any of our aunts or uncles or anyone, maybe we'll take you out just local for some apps and drinks or something.
Coming up to that day,
The forecast was saying a big snowstorm was coming in, and it looked like it was going to be late Friday into all day Saturday. So I had said to my son, obviously, doesn't seem like anyone will be able to go out on Saturday night. Why don't you just do something with your friends Friday night? Yeah, I had just mentioned to my daughter Caitlin and my sister-in-law Julie, and just had mentioned it to them about possibly getting together Friday.
just say your sister-in-law, she's related,
She's my husband's brother, Chris's wife.
and your husband has a number.
Yes, he's the oldest of 7.
And yourself and Julie Albert, you guys are friends?
Yes, we're very close.
And also, just one last question, leading up through the course of that week, where did your husband Brian go?
Last minute, I believe it was Thursday of that week, he went to New York for a funeral.
And do you know who?
It was for a New York police officer who had just been killed in the line of duty.
Do you recall how he got there?
I
to New York?
believe he may have flown Thursday to New York. Then the plan was to fly back Saturday, but that changed with the weather, and they didn't want to get stuck there. So after the funeral Friday morning, they drove home. A friend of his had driven, so he got a ride back with them on Friday.
Only if, but as far as that friend that he drove back with,
Friend who I believe had the truck there and drove was Brian Higgins.
someone that you were familiar with prior to that date in January.
Yes, he was a friend of my husband's.
Now, on that evening of the 20th, can you explain to the jury how it was that where did you decide to go with your daughter and your sister-in-law?
We just decided to go to Waterfall, a local place 5-10 minutes down the road from our house. My sister-in-law Julie picked me up at my house maybe 7:30, 7:45, and we went to the waterfall. And I believe my daughter and her boyfriend Tristan were already inside at a table.
When your sister Julie came to pick you up the house, in addition to yourself and your son Brian Jr., who, if anyone else, were any of his friends there at that
I
time?
believe 2 girlfriends may have already had come, and they were just sitting in the kitchen when I left.
And so you go out to the waterfall, you get to the waterfall where
We came in, walked in, I believe to the left, there was just some small tables, and I think Caitlin and Tristan were already sitting there. So we sat down at the table and we ordered food and just hung out for a little bit, had food and some drinks.
as far as drinks were concerned, do you recall drinking that night?
I was probably drinking White Claw.
Now, later on in the evening, was there any sort of live entertainment there?
Yes. After we ate, my daughter's boyfriend Tristan left shortly after because he was going to be going out shoveling, working with a plow guy. So he was planned to go home and just sleep, take a nap, because he was going to have to get up like in the middle of the night to go out and do that. So he had left. So it was just me, Julie, and Caitlin. At one point, the waitress had said, "Oh, a band's going to be setting up where you're sitting. Can I move you?" So she just moved us over to a high top table.
And after you were moved over to the, with anyone else in,
Shortly after, I believe my sister Jennifer and her husband Matt came in. I had texted her just saying I was there, if she was interested to come by. I think she said she was somewhere else. Did I want to come there? I said, no, I'm already situated the band's going to play. I'm just going to stay here. So she said, okay, maybe we'll come there. So maybe 9 as she came in with another couple. I believe they had been at a basketball game, their daughter's basketball game. So she came in with them.
And again, just to be clear, when you say your sister Jen and her husband Matt, she's your younger sister, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as after they came in, who, if anyone else, came in and joined your group?
Shortly after that, I believe Julie's husband, Chris, came in. He worked up the street at his pizza shop. I believe shortly after 9:30, he came down, he came in. And then in the meantime, my husband was getting close to being back to the area from driving back from New York. So I had texted him and said, hey, me and Katie and whoever else are here, if you want to come by. And he was like, oh, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I just pushed him a little, oh, Katie's here. Just come. She wants to see you. So he's like, all right, maybe I'll pop in. I believe after, so it was Jen and Matt and the other couple. And then Chris came in. And then I believe maybe around Brian came in.
Brian came in.
Shortly after, maybe 10:30, his friend Brian Higgins had come in.
Your husband Brian and Brian Higgs separately about a half.
I think so, yes.
Following that, if anyone else came into the establishment and joined.
A little bit later, I think approximately, John walked in with his girlfriend,
When you,
John O'Keefe.
how did you or did you know John O'Keefe prior to that night?
I didn't know him that well. I think I had only met him once, maybe twice through my sister. Brief interaction. I think when he first walked in, actually, I didn't recognize him. I think I said to someone, oh, who's that? Because they were walking towards our table. And they said, oh, that's John O'Keefe. I said, oh. They came in and they just went to the end of the table where my sister Jennifer and Matt and Chris and Julie were, because they knew them. I had never met Karen and I'd only met John once or twice. So they just went to the other end of the table where Jen and Matt were, who they know, and Chris and Julie, who John had been neighbors with for a couple years. So they were all just at that end talking.
Just to be clear, as far as the sister that you knew,
Yes, Jennifer.
as far as you referenced his girl, had you ever met his girlfriend before that night?
No.
You had never met Karen Read prior to that night, as far as you recall?
No.
At any point in time, did you have any interaction, or what, if any, interaction did you have with either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms. Reed?
At one point, John walked towards me and my daughter at the table and said, hey, I'm going up to the bar. Did you guys need a drink or anything? We said, no, thank you. I think he then stopped and spoke with my husband for a minute, probably was asking him the same thing. Then John went back up to the bar and then he went back down to, where he'd been standing. And that was the only interaction I had with him.
As far as your understanding,
Yes, I knew he was a Boston policeman.
was he somebody, if you know, that worked with your husband?
No, I don't believe he ever worked with my husband. I don't believe they ever crossed paths at work. I think they were in different areas of the job.
Fair to say the Boston Police Department is a relatively large department, correct?
Yeah, it's like 3,000.
Now, with reference to Ms. Reed, what, if any, interaction did you have with her that night?
I had none. I don't believe we spoke or we were introduced or anything. I don't think we spoke at all.
Now, turning back to Mr. O'Keefe just for a second, if anything you're wearing as far as clothing was concerned during your interaction?
I believe he had a hat on, some sort of just sweatshirt, jeans, and sneakers.
At any point in time that you saw him or while you, did you see any sort of?
No,
And as far as his clothing was concerned, did you observe it to have any sort of tears in it or anything like that?
no.
And as far as his face was concerned or any sort of outward part of his body, did you observe, or what, if anything, did you observe with regard to injuries on him or anything like that?
Nothing like that.
Now, as far as your home was concerned, was that somewhere that either Mr. O'Keefe or Ms. Reed had ever been to?
No.
Over the course of the evening, what, if any, discussion was there that leaving?
Well, after the band wrapped up, I was getting ready to leave and I just leaned over to my sister Jennifer and said, hey, Brian Jr.'s at the house. I think he just has 2 friends there. He's going to be turning 23 at midnight. If on your way home and you wanted to swing by and say happy birthday. If you want to do that, come by and do that. She was like, okay. And then I was just gathering up my stuff and I got ready to leave. It may have been mentioned at the table, but I had no idea if anyone else was interested in doing that or wanted to do it. I had just said it to my sister.
If anybody else had wanted to,
Oh, no, I would have no problem if anyone sitting with us had come.
but as far as you knew, you just communicated that to your sister Jennifer. And
Yes,
when you say the band was wrapping up and the bar was winding down,
yes.
about what time was that?
Like 12:45,
About what time was it? About what time was it that you left?
a little before 12-ish.
Who, if anyone, left?
It was me, my daughter, Caitlin, and my husband.
How did you get, bless you, how did you get from the waterfall back to your?
My husband drove the three of us back to Fairview Road.
When you came outside of the waterfall and were sort of getting into your car and about to drive home, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather or what was going on at that point?
It was just starting to snow a little, nothing major, just a little snowfall started coming down.
You could still see the street and the blacktop.
Yeah,
Again, about how long a car ride is that, generally speaking, from the waterfall to your house on there?
5 minutes, 7 minutes.
As when you arrived at, who, if anyone, was there when you got there?
We arrived and I came in. My son was sitting there with his two friends and my nephew Colin, who is Julie and Chris's son. He was there. I bumped into him when I walked in. I didn't realize he was there. I said, "Oh, hey, what are you doing here?" He said, "Oh, I just stopped by to see Brian, but I'm about to leave. My ride's about to be here." I said, "Oh, okay."
Back up just for a minute. So where does he park in relation to the house?
We pulled into the driveway.
Typically, is there an order to it as far as where the cars go, like his car versus your car versus any other car?
Not really, no.
Do you recall on that evening which side of the driveway he pulled into, the left?
I
or the right?
believe it was in front of the left garage.
When you come into and enter into the house when you were living there at 34 Fair, how many doors are there on the front of the house?
There's a side door by the garage, and then there's like a front door in the front of the house.
Is there any sort of particular rhyme or reason as to which door you would be entering?
We usually use the side door. Initially, I didn't like that because the side door walked right into the family room. So I like the other door, you could walk into a foyer you could take your shoes off, stuff like that. Eventually, people just didn't want to, it was, quicker to walk in the side door for the kids. So they would just go in the side door. But I think that night, because of the weather and it was wet out, I think I went in the front door so I could walk into the foyer and take my shoes off or wipe my feet or whatever. But some of the other people still may have gone in the side door.
When you into that front door, shoes off in the foyer, is that when you ran into your nephew Colin?
Yes.
About how old was Colin?
17?
You mentioned that he had a ride. Did he give you any indication as to who that ride was?
He didn't mention at that time who the ride was.
That sort of interaction that you had with Colin in your house prior to him leaving and walking out, about how long a period of time?
Couple minutes, not even, just a quick interaction.
Then he left the home. You didn't see him for the rest of the night.
No.
Then you come into the home, and again, I'm sorry, who was there initially when you?
So my son Brian and his two friends Julie and Sarah were just sitting at the kitchen table in like the dining room area of the kitchen.
Explain for the jury.
If you walk in, if you go to the right, it's like an open doorway, and that's like the dining room part of the kitchen, but then it extends to the back of the house where it's like an island and like the sink and the counters and the cabinets and all that. So it's just like long.
As far as the dining room and the kitchen, is there a wall or structure? Or anything
No,
to
it's
separate them?
open in between the two of those things.
And if I were to go sort of further back within that home beyond the kitchen and the dining, what's back?
To the right, there's the family room.
And is there anything as far as a wall? Can you see into the family room?
You can. It's like an opening. Yeah, it's not completely open, but there's an opening.
If someone was standing in the family room and you were standing in the kitchen, you could see them, converse with them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
When you come in and your son Brian Jr. is sitting around the table with two girls, Sarah and Julie, what are they doing?
We're just sitting there.
Was there any sort of music playing or anything like that going on?
There may have been. I'm not sure if there was music playing at that time, but there might have been.
You say at that time, was there anything that happened later on?
Well, later on that we had music connected to the little speaker that we were playing. Yeah, but when I first walked in, I don't remember if they had music going or not.
You get back to the house, what is it that you're doing sort of when you come back?
Come in, I assume I said happy birthday to my son, said hello to his friends. Then I just went to the kitchen area and they had ordered food. And so I just did my usual thing. I just was picking up, wasn't a huge mess, but I was just picking up the area, cleaning, probably check the bathroom to make sure that was clean. Just my usual thing that I do, just picking up around the house. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that something that you did continuously throughout the evening or?
Yeah, that's what I do.
Now, after you arrived home, who, if anyone else, came by?
Once we were there, it was me and my daughter and my husband, and Brian Higgins had come in. Then it was Brian and his two friends were already there. And my sister Jen and her husband Matt came in maybe 12:15ish.
Mr. Higgins, did he come in around the same time as you, or did he come after or before?
Yeah, he came in the same time. I think he might have pulled up to our house before us. But we got out of the car and went right into the house. So I assume he just came in basically around the same time.
Do you have any idea sort of what Mr. Higgins was driving that night when he came to your house?
I believe it was a Jeep.
Any idea where, in reference to your house, where Mr. Higgins parked?
Thought it was out on the curb facing up Fairview, maybe by our mailbox, but it could have been in the driveway. I'm not 100% sure.
Not something you were particularly paying attention to?
No.
And at some point after you and your daughter and your husband and then Mr. Higgins comes along, about how long a period of time is it between your arrival in the home and then when Miss McCabe and her husband?
15 minutes, 20 minutes?
As far as your nephew Colin, when he had left, was Miss McCabe and her husband there yet?
No.
When Miss McCabe and her husband come, where is it that, while you're at your house, where is it that everybody's calm?
They came in and they sat down at the kitchen table with Brian and his two friends. And then I believe my daughter, Caitlin, was sitting at the table as well.
Back at your home after leaving the bar?
Yeah.
About how long, skip forward to a little bit, people had left your home, about how long a period of time was it that people, from the time that you arrived back from Waterfall to the time that people left and you closed down?
By the time everyone left, it was probably close to 2.
Who was the last person?
My daughter, Caitlin.
You know how it was that she left, or who, if anyone, picked her up?
Her boyfriend, Tristan, picked her up because, like I said, he was going to have to get up anyways overnight to do the shoveling, plowing thing. So I think she didn't want to get stuck probably at our house for the next day. So she had just said, hey, can you?
End your answer there. Next question, Mr. Lally.
Prior to your daughter Caitlin leaving, who was the, let me ask you, as far as people leaving from your house, what was the order of how people left and when?
I believe Brian Higgins left first, approximately 1:30ish. Then Jennifer and Matt and Brian's two friends left 12:45, 12:50. And then, 1:45, 1:50, I'm sorry. Then Caitlin was probably closer to 2.
When your daughter Caitlin left, if anyone was left downstairs and yourself and the other people?
Just me.
So your son and your husband had both gone up to bed at that point?
Yes.
At any point in time, you mentioned that there were a number of people that were around the table in the kitchen. And
Yes, sorry.
where did anybody else go around your house?
I know at one point my husband and his friend Brian were in our family room. So I went in there and was talking to them. We had some shelves on the wall that just had a bunch of pictures, old pictures from our wedding or when Brian was in the Marine. So we would just look at them, laugh and talking about them. We stood in there for a little bit talking. And then eventually we just moved into the kitchen area where everybody else was.
To your knowledge, had Mr. Higgins been over to your house?
He may have been at our house for a graduation party, but I wasn't sure if he had ever been inside because the party was outside. It was a cookout. So I don't know if he'd been in that part of my house.
Now, as far as the outside, at any point in time during the course of the evening, did you hear anything unusual, see anything unusual outside of
I didn't.
At any point in time, were you aware of anybody coming to your house that didn't come in?
I was only aware at one point I saw my son, I think, either looking out the window or at the door, and his friend Julie, she went out the side door, and I said, to Brian, is Julie leaving? He said, no, she had asked her brother for a ride.
Objection sustained. No conversation. Mr. Lally's going to ask another question.
You saw your son's friend Julie go outside, and
So that has to be a
Sorry.
yes or no.
at some point, did Julie come back into the house?
Yes.
About how long was it, if you know, that she was outside before she came back?
I don't think it was very long, couple minutes.
Over the course of the entirety of the evening, at any point, did anybody else, other than the people that you talked about previously, come into your house? Specifically, John O'Keefe or Karen Read that you saw at the bar earlier that night, at any point in time on the evening of the 28th or the early morning of the 29th, did either of those people come into your house?
No, they never came into my home.
At any point in time, even on that evening or that early morning of the 29th, were you aware that they were coming?
I actually wasn't. I think when I was in the other room with my husband and his friend, I had missed the conversations about Jennifer reaching out with John or him and him texting her about where we lived. I didn't even realize that was happening, that they had any intention to come.
Let me ask you a little bit about sort of going back to the waterfall just for a brief course of your time there. How would you describe the tone or how was everybody?
It was fine. It was a nice night. It was nothing out of the usual. Just had a good time.
Nothing abnormal, no arguments, no fighting or anything like that?
No.
Same question as it relates to back at your house now at 34 Fairview Road. How would you describe the atmosphere back?
Same thing. We were just hanging out, sitting around the house, talking, having a good time. Nothing crazy.
After your daughter, Caitlin, gets picked up and she leaves, what, if any, how long did you stay up after?
I think once she left, I just did my final cleanup of the kitchen and shut the lights, and I went upstairs to bed.
Do you recall anything about walking the front door or anything?
No.
Is that something that you would always do, typically do, never do?
It was type of thing, we have 5 kids, everyone's coming in and out at different times. Like the last person in was supposed to lock it, but then we changed the doorknobs and immediately the keys got lost. It was just always a disaster so a lot of times the door was just left unlocked.
When you went up to bed, you awake or asleep? in
He
bed?
was awake. He was just lying in bed watching TV.
Now, as far as over the course of that evening after you come up to bed with your husband, do you recall anything about him talking to anyone on the phone or any phone conversations or anything?
I do not.
At some point you fall asleep and then you wake up the next day, is that right?
Yes.
Turning your attention to later on that morning on the 29th. So you had gone to bed about what time?
Probably 2:30ish, somewhere around there.
It's a little unclear for my question, but when you go up to your bedroom, about what time is that?
About 2-ish.
30 that you're talking about, is that sort of when you fall asleep?
Yeah, sometime around there.
From that next morning, how is it that you wake up the next morning?
Well, at the point between 6 and 6:30 that morning, my sister Jennifer came bursting into my bedroom.
Bursting into your bedroom, is that correct?
Yes.
What, if any, how would you describe your sister Jennifer and how was she acting at that point?
She came in, my husband and I just sat up in bed. She's saying, he's out in the snow. We found him out in the snow. We don't know if he's okay. My immediate thought was just that something had happened to one of my children. Something had happened to one of her children. I couldn't imagine why she was in my bedroom at this time in the morning. I'm like, Jennifer, what are you talking about? She's
All right, next question.
Sorry, one moment. Be back up just for a second and I'll get back. As far as when your sister Jennifer comes into your bedroom, do you know about what time that was?
between 6 and 6:30.
And it's fair to say that's not a normal occurrence.
It's never happened before.
If you could just describe your sister Jennifer's demeanor when she first comes into your bedroom.
She was hysterical.
She says some things to you, and then where did you go?
I tried to ask her what was going on. What is she talking about? She told us.
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I'm going to allow that.
So she told us what had happened or what she had just witnessed outside. And we were just trying to understand what she's saying. Like I said, I didn't know if it was something that happened to one of her kids, one of my kids. So I said, Jennifer, I don't know what you're talking about. So she finally was like, John, remember John from last night at the waterfall? I'm like, what do you mean? How could he be outside? She's like, you got to get up. The police are here and they want to talk to you. So my husband and I got up. I think I threw on a sweatshirt. We started to walk down the stairs. As we walked down the stairs into that foyer area, Officer Link was walking in the house.
So that front foyer area would have been the front door you were talking about. When you get down to the bottom of the stairs, just Officer Lank or there any other
It was just Officer Link at that time. The door was halfway open. I pushed it open, looked out, and I saw like a cruisers and a couple of guys standing out in the snow. I said, Jennifer, where's John now?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to ask you to move on, Mr. Lally. The objection sustained.
As far as when you looked outside, did you see any ambulance or fire truck or anything like that?
No, I didn't see an ambulance. I did see maybe 2 cruisers. I don't remember if there was a fire truck there. I don't think there was, but I'm not sure.
And as far as Officer Lank or any other officers, is that correct?
Yeah.
And where did they go once you opened the door?
So he came in the house, and I believe around the same time Jennifer's husband, Matt, had come. I assume she had called him or whatever. So it was me, Brian, and Jen and Matt. And Officer Lang said, can I come in? Can I talk to you guys? We said, sure, absolutely. He came in, we sat at the table, and he was just asking us all, where were you last night?
Sustain. Next question, please.
That same dining room area.
And without regard to content of the conversation, but about how long a period of time did that?
I don't know, 45 minutes, maybe. I'm not exactly sure.
As far as how the conversation ended, at any point during the conversation, did yourself or your sister or your husband or did anyone ever end the conversation or tell the officers to leave the home or anything like that?
No.
You welcomed them inside once you realized what was going on?
Yes, absolutely. I believe another officer had come in as well.
Now, after the officers leave from your home, what happened?
So I believe they left and said that someone would be in touch with us, the state police or somebody. So they left and we were all just sitting there in shock. I'm asking Jennifer, what happened? How did you end up here? What's going on?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Next question, please.
Your Honor, as far as they would approach us, Ms. Albert, any sort of specifics of your conversation with Ms. McCabe, you had a conversation with her, is that correct?
Yes,
And about how long did that conversation go on for?
just her. We were all just sitting around the table talking.
Just to be clear, when we say all, who is all at this?
It was me, my husband, and Jennifer and Matt.
At some point later on, did other people come over?
Yes, at some point, my friend Brian Higgins, my husband's friend Brian Higgins came over.
Do you know how he came to be at your house that morning?
I believe Brian called him to let him know he had been with us the night before, and I think he had been friends with John and Karen, so Brian thought he should let him know.
Do you know about what time that was or how long after the officers left that Mr. Higgins came over?
Could have been 15, 20 minutes. I feel like he came somewhere around 7:38, and maybe the link had been done by 7. If he was around 6:30, I'm not really sure of the specifics.
And what happened then?
Then we were all just still sitting there. Kerry, who is another person that was called that morning, she had been at the hospital, so she was calling Jennifer, giving updates as to what was happening with John. So we were waiting to hear how he was, if he was okay. Then around, I don't know if it was 8:30, I had noticed my sister-in-law, Julie, had pulled into the driveway, and I saw her get out, and she was putting a box of donuts in my son's car, whose birthday it was, because they had a bit between them where every year she did that. She got him donuts and she would leave them for him. So I saw her and I said to my husband, "Oh,
Okay, not what you said, so wait for another question.
sorry."
That's okay.
Spoke to her husband, and where did he go?
He went to the door to, Julie was about to get back. She should be made aware of what was going on.
So your husband goes at some point, sister-in-law Julie comes into the house.
Yes.
If you know about how long period was Julie at your house initially that?
An hour or two, I'm not sure.
If you're not sure, you're not sure. So as far as people that were over your house that morning, do you have any idea how long people were congregating around your house after that initial Miss McKay bursting into your bedroom?
Again, it could have been between an hour and 2.
At some point, we mentioned that the Canton officers had indicated that you may be spoken to at some subsequent time by troopers from the state police, correct?
Yes.
And when was it that you, when was it in relation to this date that you spoke to anybody from the state police?
I wasn't interviewed for a couple days later
Do you recall where you were when you were in?
at my house.
Now, reference to, you indicated that on the way back from the waterfall to your house at Fairview on night previous, on the 28th and the 29th, it just started to snow, is that correct?
Yes.
When you looked outside or opened the door for Officer Lank as he came into the house, what, if anything, did you observe as far as the weather and how it had changed?
To me, it was starting to look like blizzard conditions. It was very windy. It was snowing. Snow was starting to come down a lot now, and it was probably a couple inches accumulated, and it was.
Now, at any point in time over the course of that day, did you go outside from your house into the front yard or the driveway or anywhere?
I didn't.
Anyone else from your house other than the people coming and going? The people that live there, did you observe them going out into the front of the house area?
No.
Ms. Albert, I'm placing before you a series of 8 photographs. I just asked you to look at them, review them, and then just look up whenever you finish.
Are these already in evidence?
Fair enough. Just ask you, ma'am, in general, in those photographs, do you recognize what's in those photographs?
Yes,
What do you recognize?
that's my front yard.
That was your front yard when you lived at 34 Fairview Road?
Yes.
What's contained in there, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of around the time of January 29th, 2000?
Yes.
So what I'm showing you here is what's been marked as exhibits 58, 59, 60, and 60. I'm going to direct your attention to this before you. It's a laser pointer. Just click on this button. With the court's permission, first I'd just like to start with exhibit 58 on the screen. Do you recognize what's up on the screen there?
Yes.
What do you recognize there?
It was my home at the time.
From this photograph, do you see that front door area where the foyer is and the side door area that you were talking about on?
Yes.
If you could, using the laser pointer in your hand, just direct the jury's attention to where each of those are.
That would be the very front door, and then the side doors over here in between.
And as far as the sort of what's in the front portion of this photograph, do you recognize that as, if I'm standing and facing as this photograph is, your house, where you lived at 34 Fairview? What, if anything, do you have as sort of a landmark or an item that you observe in that sort of left area?
Flagpole?
Is there a fire hydrant there?
Yes.
Do you see anything as far as like a box or something like that?
Yeah, I believe there was some electrical box that I don't think we ever actually knew what it was or what it did.
Fair to say all the years that you lived there, it's not something utilized, knew what it really did.
No.
Now, this particular area of the yard, in its relation to the house, was that a part of the yard that was used or utilized by the family all that much when you lived there?
No,
And that part of the yard where the fire hydrant, flagpole, that is, how close is that to the next door neighbors abutting the property?
it's pretty close. It's almost, I would say, on the, close to the property line.
Now, as far as from the side of the road, in between sort of the curbing from the roadway and your front lawn, there's nothing there as far as a sidewalk or anything like that, is that correct? The curbing that's between sort of the roadway and the front lawn, how would you describe that? Is it sharp curb, rounded curb?
A rounded curb.
Now, with reference to your drive, do you see that depicted in this particular photograph?
You can't really see it in the picture, no. But it's would be over here. Yeah.
If I could direct your attention to the next photograph that you have before you.
Mhm.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have that one up on the screen as well. Would you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes.
And this is just another photograph of your home as it was around January 2022 at 34.
Yes.
From this photograph now, the driveway and where that is.
Yes.
If you could just indicate to the jury where in this photograph that would be.
The driveway was right here. The two garage doors, and then there was driveway along here.
Now, in reference to that driveway, or in reference to your family at the time that lived at the house, about how many cars would there typically be when everyone's home parked in the driveway?
Could have been 4. Let me think. I think 4.
Who would those vehicles be typically operated by, and what kind of vehicles are we talking about?
I had my car, which was a Cadillac SUV. My husband had his work car. And then we had, I think, a Ford Explorer. Then the kids were driving a Ford Escape, maybe?
All sort of bigger cars, all sort of.
Yeah.
If I could direct your attention to the next photograph. Again, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as the next exhibit?
Yes.
Just for the record, if you could read the number that's on that photograph now.
See.
Again, what's up on the screen, is that just another depiction of your home at that time?
Yes.
Now, when you open that door and Officer Lank is there and you invite him into your house to talk, you said that you saw some cruisers, correct? Where in relation to your property were the cruisers when you opened the door and saw them? If you could direct the jury's attention in this photograph.
I believe they were somewhere here.
If I could direct your attention to the next, again, the photograph that's up on the screen, is that what you have before you? Again, I'm sorry to keep asking you to
Yes,
do this, but
yes.
if you could read the number that's on the photograph.
60.
And so 63 up on the screen, if you could describe to the jury sort of what part of your property or abutting property are we looking at?
I believe our property ended somewhere along here.
Right about in the general area of the electrical box?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that next door residence there, Dan, what the number was for that?
I don't. Maybe 36. I'm not sure.
Somewhere in the vicinity of your number.
Yeah.
If I could direct your attention to the next photograph.
54.
Thank you. With respect to this photograph, as far as the sort of side door, do you see that in this photograph?
Yeah. The side door would be right here.
And there's another door off to the right of the photograph, is that correct?
Yep. That door would go into the garage.
Typically, at least around this time, January or late January 20th, as far as the vehicles that you were talking about, would any of those vehicles go in the garage, or what was in the garage?
The garage was a little bit cluttered. If there was a storm coming, we would try to arrange things so we could at least maybe get 1 or 2 of the cars in there. But otherwise, we didn't put the cars in the garage. Only if it was going to be a storm, we would try to get some of them out of the driveway.
And with reference to these specific dates of January storms, do you recall anything as far as putting vehicles?
I don't. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we had maybe put mine in there because I had gotten picked up that night. I'm not sure.
I believe, is there one more photograph that we have to talk about?
Yeah, no. Okay.
In addition, let me ask you this. At this time in January of 2022, did your family have any pets?
Yes,
How many pets did you have?
we had one. We had a dog.
What was the dog?
Club.
What type of dog was it?
It was a German Shepherd mix.
How long had you had the dog?
About 6 years, I believe.
Do you recall when you got the dog, how you got the dog, or where you got the dog from?
We got the dog from a shelter in Texas.
What type of shelter? Or
Yes,
where did the dog typically go within?
it was when it was allowed anywhere in the house.
As far as nighttime, would there be any sort of particular pattern of where the dog would sleep?
Yes, at nighttime when we went up to bed, it came up with us and it slept in our bedroom.
At any point in time, during the time from when you returned from the waterfall to your home, where was the dog?
The dog had been up in the room, and I believe my husband, when we first got in, brought her down to let her out to go to the bathroom.
When the dog went out to go to the bathroom and lived at 34 Fairview Road, where would the dog go? How was that done?
Well, she pretty much she knew the door where to go. So when she had to go, she would go to that door and she would just go out and run in the backyard and go and on her own.
So on her own, and someone would stand at the back door?
Yes,
The back door that we're talking about, what kind of door?
it's a regular door.
It opens, it is a sliding door.
Oh yeah, no, just a regular door. It had, I think, a storm door behind it.
The backyard area of your home, if you lived there in around January, how was that enclosed at all?
It was fenced in.
Couldn't get out if everything's closed up in the back.
Yes, as long as the gates were shut.
And as far as that particular evening, after you returned from the waterfall, you indicated your husband let the dog out. How long a period of time was the dog outside?
I believe it was pretty quick. She went, did her business and came back in. I think she might have walked around the kitchen for a minute or two. And then I think you just brought her back upstairs.
To your knowledge, did Chloe the dog, at some point, obviously you've moved from 34 Fairview to North, correct?
hmm
When about was it in relation to this incident, January 29th, 2022, that you,
We moved in April of 3.
if any plans or discussions were there in reference to moving prior to January?
Objection, Your Honor.
So not the specifics, generally, not the conversation.
We had always planned to move, but it was in our plans that, what kids were starting to get older. We were looking to possibly downsize. So at the end of 2021, my husband's brother had sold his house.
Objection.
No, I'm going to allow that.
My husband's brother had sold his house and got a good deal for it. It sold pretty quickly. The market was really good at that time. So we just started thinking, hey, the kids are getting older. A couple of them had already moved out. We weren't going to be able to stay in that house. It's like a 5-bedroom house. Once our kids were gone, my husband and I wouldn't have been able to maintain that. Needed a lot of work. We couldn't afford it. So we said, maybe now's the time we should put it on the market and see what happens. So I think in November, December of,
So hold on. Next question, Mr. Lally.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Objection, leading.
The objection sustained. Ask a non-leading question.
When was it that the sale was finalized?
April of 3.
As far as selling the house, what, if any, relation, what occurred on?
It had no relation to it. We had already had thoughts and plans of doing it before that happened. We had reached out to a realtor in the end of 21.
I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Little?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Albert.
Hello.
You were at the Waterfall Bar and Grill on January 29th for approximately 4.5 hours. Is that correct?
I was there from, say, 7:45, 8 till about midnight.
About 4 hours?
Yeah.
You were there with a group of individuals, including Brian Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matt McCabe, Julie Albert, Chris Albert, Caitlin Albert, and Tristan Morris, and then were later joined by Brian Higgins, correct?
Yes,
You testified that John O'Keefe and Karen Read joined your group around 11 p.m. Is that right?
approximately.
Over the course of those 4 hours that you were there, did you see any sort of tension whatsoever between John and Ms. Read?
No, they were only there for an hour when I was there, but didn't have really any interaction with them. But no, I didn't see anything.
So based on your observations, everyone appeared generally happy and in good spirits, correct?
Yes. Yep.
At any point while you were at the Waterfall Bar and Grill, did you observe Karen Read stumbling, slurring her words, or otherwise?
I did not, but again, I never engaged in any sort of conversation with her.
Did you observe your husband, Brian Higgins, engaging in practice fighting techniques while you were at the Waterfall Bar and Grill?
Saw them, yeah.
Your Honor, if I could show just a screenshot of a video that's been previously marked.
A screenshot of it? Sure. Yes. So can you take this down just until the witness has it, please? I thought you were just showing the screenshot. You want to show it up here?
Yeah.
So what are you doing? I don't think there's a need to. I thought you were showing something to the juror that you were just, all right. So we will mark it for identification. So hold on. We need to, so we'll mark it for identification. So we'll take it from the witness for a minute, please. We'll mark it for identification, but this is incorporated in what exhibit number?
I believe it's exhibit 50.
All right. Just so our record's clear.
Thank you.
One screenshot is W for identification. All right. So now you can,
Your Honor, if I may, I haven't seen what the witness is looking at. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
all right. So you want to display it on the screen now, Ms. Little?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sure. Go right ahead.
Ms. Albert, do you see the two individuals, two males?
Yeah,
I know it's hard to see.
Yeah.
Who is the man that has just been zoomed in with the logo on the back of his sweatshirt?
I believe it's Brian.
Okay. And then the person.
I think, yeah, it's a little hard to tell.
I know this is hard to see because the number's blocking it.
Yeah,
But does that appear to be your husband to the left, kind of in a fighting stance?
yeah, I think so.
Ms. Albert, when your husband drinks, does he often
So I'm
spar
sorry. Are we
with-
taking this down or keeping it up?
Yes, Your Honor, you can
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Albert, when your husband drinks, does he often get into sort of these practice sparring, practice fighting stances? Is that common for him?
Objection.
No, I'm going to allow it.
I don't think so.
So this type of behavior was unusual for him.
No, I think they were just fooling around. I don't think there was anything.
Is it unusual for you to see him sort of fighting?
I wouldn't call that practice fighting. I think they were just fooling around. Yeah, maybe I've seen him do that other times, but it was fooling around. They weren't practicing.
Let me put this a different way. You do know that you're highly trained.
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Absolutely not.
Your husband has no fighting experience whatsoever.
A highly trained fighter? No, he's not.
He has experience, correct?
Objection.
I'm going to see you at sidebar on this, please.
Albert, your husband has boxing experience, correct?
Yes.
He also has fighting experience from his training in the military, correct?
I don't know what fighting experience from the military means. He was in the Marine Corps. He was out of the Marine Corps in 1992.
But he had training through the Marine Corps and through the Boston Police Department with fighting and defensive tactics, correct? Ms. Albert, you testified earlier that you left the waterfall 11:45.
No, I said I think closer to 12.
Could I show you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 53? Your Honor, could I have permission to publish? Mr. Bates, if I could have you start the video at 5:40. If you could pause this video.
No, I don't.
Do you see the woman that's in the lower quadrant? Do you recognize that individual at all?
I don't. I can't tell who that is.
I know this is not the best video, so I'll play a little bit more and see if you might be able to recognize it. You don't recognize who that individual is?
It could be me. I'm not sure. I can't really tell.
All right, so this is an instance where the video has to speak for itself, right?
You could play just for a little bit longer. Did you recognize the woman that just walked forward?
Yes. Now seeing the coat, I recognize that it's me.
Thank you. Did you see what was in your hand when you walked by?
I don't.
You appear to be holding something.
Yes.
What is?
Looks like a can.
What time is that video taken?
58.
So that would have been approximately the time that you were leaving the Waterfall Bar and Grill.
Yep.
You guys had a fun night. It looks like you grabbed the White Claw. You're about to leave. Is that correct?
Yes.
You testified earlier that you got home.
So can we turn the lights back on?
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me switch gears a little bit. You testified earlier that there are 4 cars that are usually parked in the driveway at 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
You listed at least the make and model of about 3 of those vehicles.
Yeah.
Do you recall that?
Yep.
You said there's a Cadillac that usually is parked in your driveway, there's a Ford Explorer, and there's a Ford Escape, correct? But you also said there's a 4th car. That's your husband's work vehicle. correct?
Yes. Yeah.
What type of car is that?
That's a Ford Edge.
A black Ford Edge. correct?
Yes. Yep.
Is there a reason that you didn't want to state or commit to that in front of this jury when you originally testified?
No, there's no reason. I was just trying to think of all the different cars. We have 5 kids. We've had a lot of different vehicles. I was just saying it as how I remembered it.
News coverage in this case has revealed the importance of a Ford Edge. correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Abstained.
In your mind, a Ford Edge has significance to this case, doesn't it?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, can you answer that? Does a Ford Edge have significance in this case to you?
I've heard it talked about. Yeah.
What you've heard talked about is that an eyewitness saw a Ford-
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to stop you on that. The objection sustained.
Ms. Albert, you know there's significance to the Ford Edge, and that's the one
Objection, Your
vehicle
Honor.
that you did not mention in your initial.
So I'm going to allow that question. Can you answer that?
I just was trying to think of all the different makes and models. I did not purposely say that.
Where did your husband, you testified earlier that you weren't sure exactly where Brian Higgins that night when he arrived at your house, correct? You said, I'm not sure, but then you gave a pretty vivid description about him being parked, you think, in front of the house by the mailbox facing away from your residence,
Right.
correct?
Yep.
Is that statement something that's from your personal recollection or for something that you've discussed with other witnesses in this case?
No, it's from my personal recollection of what I'm pretty sure I remembered. He pulled in first, he backed out so we could pull in, and then I'm pretty sure he pulled out and parked along the curb where the mailbox was.
So you haven't discussed that statement with any other witnesses in this case?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
You testified earlier that when you arrived at 34 Fairview, your son, Brian Albert Jr. was there, Julie Nagel was there, Sarah Levinson was there, and that your nephew, Colin Albert, was also correct?
Yes.
Can you describe your interaction with Colin Albert when you walked in the door?
It was literally, I was coming in. I think we almost bumped into each other. I said, I didn't realize he was there. I said, hey, what are you doing here? He said, oh, I just come by to see Brian, but my ride's on its way. I'm about to leave. I said, oh, okay. I said, all right, I see ya. He just continued on. I think he must have went out the door.
When you first testified, I believe you stated that you saw Colin seated at the table with Brian Jr.
When I testified, when?
earlier.
I don't believe I said
And
that.
Shortly after,
No, I don't believe I said that.
you never said that he was initially seated with Brian Jr.
No, I'm pretty sure I said when I walked in, I immediately saw him.
When you walked in the door, you're saying he was already leaving to go get him.
He was standing, looked to me like he was getting ready for someone who was coming to pick him up.
When you pulled up with Brian Higgins, and you have never mentioned seeing any other vehicle waiting outside the house for Colin.
No,
You didn't observe another vehicle outside the house.
no. He said to me, my ride's almost here. I'm leaving. So I didn't see anything outside about his ride.
And it was cold outside.
I don't know if he went and stood and waited by the door. I came in the house and like I said, I immediately said hello to my son, his friends. I went and started doing my cleaning and I didn't really pay attention. I assume he left because I never saw him again.
So you're not sure if he was standing by the
I'm not sure. He could have been standing there waiting. He said his ride was about to be there.
but you didn't see him.
I did not see him leave.
You testified that your German Shepherd, Chloe, was also at the house when you arrived home on January.
Yes.
She's a large German.
Yep, about 70 pounds.
She's not great with strangers.
I wouldn't say that.
You wouldn't say that she's a poorly worded question. Would you say that she's good with strangers?
I'd say she's fine with strangers.
She's definitely not good with other animals, is she?
No, she did not like other dogs.
Chloe actually has a well-documented fight, doesn't she?
Objection.
Does she?
With dogs, a couple dogs, yes.
Ms. Albert, she also has a bite history with humans, doesn't she?
Objection.
Ask that differently.
Ms. Albert, Chloe has injured other humans.
Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
In one incident in May of 22, when she got out and was fighting with another dog, the woman whose dog it was tried to break up the two dogs. While she was trying to break up the two dogs, she got injured.
There are actually two individuals who were injured in that incident, correct?
There was two women, but I believe just one woman, from what I understand, had an injury from Chloe. The other one may have fallen or something, but I'm not sure 100%.
There were two women who were actually taken to the hospital after that incident, correct?
The police or called an ambulance just to make sure they were okay.
You mentioned that Chloe had actually escaped from the backyard
Mm-hmm.
in that incident.
Yes.
And that happened.
It had happened a few times, yes.
Mr. Albert let Chloe out when he arrived.
Yep.
Ms. Albert, you don't have Chloe anymore, do you?
Nope.
In May of 2022, 4 months after Mr. O'Keefe's death, you got rid of your family dog of 6 years.
Objection.
So is that true? Is that when you got rid of your dog?
I did not get rid of my dog. I rehomed my dog.
Your dog is
Where she is, she's in Vermont. In previous testimony, that information has all been given. So if she was ever needed for anything, we know where she is.
was that testimony given to the defense
Probably.
hearing where you testified about this?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Your Honor, can we approach?
Sure.
Ms. Albert, you're aware that we actually saw records regarding Chloe and her bites.
Objection, Your Honor.
Was it from this witness?
It was.
That's a yes or no from there. Yes or no?
It was from.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
I want to direct your attention back to the early morning of January 29th. You testified that everyone who arrived at your house just after midnight was generally gathered at the table in the kitchen area, correct?
Yes.
Over the course of that evening, you had never heard any sort of disruption inside, correct?
No.
You didn't hear a crash.
There
never
needs
heard-
to be an answer.
Sorry. No.
You certainly never heard any screaming or yelling,
No.
and you never heard the screech of any brakes outside, correct?
Correct.
On July 20th, 2023, you testified before a grand jury. Mr. Lally was not there, correct? Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you were specifically asked during the course of that hearing where everyone was positioned around the table that night. You remember that sort of line of questioning? You explained that your sister Jennifer was seated next to Brian.
Objection. Is there a question?
We're getting that question, so go ahead.
You were very specific about how people were seated at that table that night. Do you remember that testimony? You explained that Jennifer was seated next to Brian Jr. and Matt McCabe was across from him. Do you recall that?
Yep.
But when you were asked where your husband and Brian Higgins were positioned at the table, you weren't able to place. Isn't that true?
Because I don't believe they ever sat at that table.
What you told the grand jury was that at least at one point, They had left the room and they were out of.
I'm not sure I said that.
Told the jury that you were cleaning and you weren't sure where they went, correct?
Initially, when I first came in the house and I was doing my thing, I don't remember exactly where they were.
They told the grand jury that you don't recall seeing them at the table, but you don't recall where they went because you were focused on cleaning. Correct? There was one point at which you said that you joined them in family
Yes.
room. Is that right? But while you were cleaning, you said, I don't really know what they were doing, but they weren't there, correct?
Yes,
So you recall your husband and Brian Higgins left your view and went to some other place in the house that evening, correct?
it could have.
Ms. Albert, how many steps is it from the front door to the basement? Poorly worded question, I will rephrase it. When you open the front door of your house, how many steps does it take to get to the door to the basement?
4 or 5.
You testified earlier that Brian Higgins left 34 first, correct?
Yes,
Then Matt, Jennifer McCabe, Sarah Levinson, and Julie Nagel left together, correct?
yes,
The very last person to leave your house that night, you said today under oath, was your daughter, Caitlin, correct?
yes.
You said she left your house close to, is that right?
Yep.
Ms. Albert, that's not what you told Sergeant on January 29th, 2022, is it?
I don't recall what I told him.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at your statement to Sergeant Lang?
Sure.
I'd like to direct your attention to page 2 of the supplemental.
Would you show the prosecutor, please?
Just so that I can please read.
Your Honor, may we approach just briefly?
Ms. Little, maybe you can clarify that. Yes.
I'd like you to take a look too. You don't need to read it out loud. Read this very last paragraph here.
Down hit 7.
Actually, this section right here,
Okay.
the second paragraph to the bottom. You don't need to read it out loud. Just look up once you're done.
Are you going to clarify that, Ms. Little? Statement?
Oh, how can I approach, Your Honor? Ms. Albert, this is just a police report containing an interview that was conducted, correct?
Yep.
With Sergeant Lang on January 29th. Is that right?
Yes, the morning of.
Thank you. Have you had a chance to?
Yeah.
Recollection? Excuse me. Is your recollection refreshed?
Yep.
Isn't it true that you told Sergeant Lang that your daughter left at 12:15 on January 29th?
Do not recall saying that. I've maintained in every interview testimony I've had that she was the last to leave. I don't know, it was very confusing that morning. Officer Lank was trying to ask everybody, where had you been? Where had you been? When did you get here? When did you leave? I don't know if somehow it was misconstrued, but I've always maintained that Caitlin was the last to leave.
That's because Sergeant Lang was talking to everyone at the same time.
Yeah, we're sitting around the table. It was a little, everyone was, we're all in shock. It was a little confusing.
Sure, it was more of a conversation than an.
I guess you could say that.
Yes.
I don't believe I said that. I think maybe someone was saying, oh, Jen and Matt got there at 12:15. He misunderstood. It got misconstrued later in his notes. But I've always said in any other time I was questioned that my daughter was the last one to leave. So I don't,
So you weren't trying to protect your daughter.
no,
You were forthcoming about the troopers with information about the individuals who were present that
yes,
night. Okay. Case at length before your interviews with law enforcement, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Do.
of course we discussed the case, but just everything that was going on, we were trying to figure out what happened.
You testified that you spoke to Trooper Proctor on February 3rd, 2022. Is that correct?
Yes,
That would be 6 days after this occurred. Is that right?
yep,
That's the very first time that you were ever interviewed by Massachusetts State Police.
yes, yep,
Aside from that sort of conversation you described with Sergeant.
yep.
When you spoke to Trooper Proctor on February 3rd, 2022, you left a lot of names out of individuals who were present at your house on the morning of January 29th, 2022. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure who was left out.
Did you tell Trooper Proctor that your son, Brian Albert Jr., was home that night?
Was home the night of his birthday, or what do you mean?
Yes, the night of his birthday.
He was home with his friends.
Did you tell that to Trooper Proctor?
I assume I did.
If it wasn't in his report, that would have been his mistake.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you tell Trooper Proctor your daughter, Caitlin Albert, returned home with you after the waterfall?
I believe so.
Did you tell Trooper Proctor that your son had 2 female friends at your house when you arrived?
I believe so.
Notably, did you tell Trooper Proctor that Colin Albert was present at your house?
I probably didn't, because anytime I was questioned about who was there, to me it was who was there afterwards, hanging out from like the 12:15 point on. I didn't consider Colin as being there because I literally crossed paths with him. He left, and I didn't consider him being a part of the group that was there.
Were you who was at the house that night?
I assume he asked that. But I also didn't mention the people that my son had previous, because I didn't consider them as part of the people that I was with when I got home.
You You never mentioned Colin Albert to Trooper Proctor, correct?
Correct.
You never mentioned Colin Albert to Sergeant Lang.
Correct.
Ms. Albert, you knew that if you gave Trooper Proctor the name of your nephew, that he would have to interview him,
Objection.
All right, I'm going to sustain that objection.
or your nephew to have to tell the police what they saw, what they heard, and what they did then.
Objection.
I'm going to allow that. Is that true?
That is not true.
But you never told Trooper Proctor.
I didn't mention Colin because I didn't consider him as part of the group that we were hanging out with after the waterfall because he left as soon as I walked in. I didn't even think of him.
Didn't even think of him.
No,
Didn't think it might be important for the state trooper who is investigating this case to know the individuals who are leaving at the precise time that Mr. O'Keefe and Ms. Reed arrived at the.
Objection.
Sustained.
Ms. Albert, what's the first thing you remember waking up to on the morning of January?
my sister bombing into my bedroom.
Your Honor, if we could approach.
Approach sidebar. Or you, Ms. Little, we're going to mark what you have in your hand for identification.
Ms. Albert, I'd like to show you a photograph which purports to be.
Photograph.
Ms. Albert, do you recognize that photograph?
Yep.
What is it?
Picture of my house.
Does it appear to be generally to scale? Do you recognize sort of the flagpole in the yard,
Yes.
the house?
Yep.
The driveway? That looks.
Yes.
And that looks accurate in terms of scale, correct?
Yes.
Permission to publish?
Sure.
Ms. Albert, where is your bedroom located?
Do you want me to show it?
Yes, if you could explain.
Right up here.
Your bedroom is in that upper left-hand quadrant, correct?
Yes.
Far left window, that's your bedroom window. Is that right?
The two of them.
On January 29th, you had two bedroom windows on the left side of the house that were facing the front lawn where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
Yes.
You're aware that Ms. Reed, Jennifer McCabe, and Carrie Roberts arrived outside your property around 6:04 a.m., correct?
Yes.
Did you hear any fire trucks that morning?
I did not.
Did you hear any ambulances?
I did not.
You didn't see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles outside your bedroom window?
I did not. My blinds were shut. My curtains were closed. I did not see anything.
You testified the very first thing you remember was Jennifer McCabe waking you up in your bedroom.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, just to keep track, are we going to take this down now, Ms. Little? Or we can keep the lights on? I just want to keep track of that.
Yes, ma'am,
Okay,
thank you. What time was it?
I thought it was somewhere between 6 and 6:30.
Can I have a moment?
sure.
If I told you it was around 6:45 based on video surveillance footage, would you quarrel with that?
What you say?
Does that sound about right to you?
I initially from the beginning just said 6:30. I wasn't quite sure.
What the two calls that you received from your sister, 6:00 and 6:08 a.m., which were,
I never answered any phone calls from my sister that morning.
you're aware that the Cellbrite records indicated that you answered two calls from your sister.
Objection, Your Honor.
7 and 6:08 a.m.
The objection sustained.
You could take a look at this report. Ms. Albert, you received,
If I could just see what's being shown to the witness before. May we approach?
I'm going to take that, please.
To Ms. Albert,
Thank you.
you can go back and ask a question and let's see where we go with this.
Ms. Albert, do you recognize this document?
Recognize it?
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, I see what it is.
Does it refresh your recollection as to the two calls you received on the morning of January 29th?
It says here 2 calls were
With-
placed.
Don't read it, but you were asked a specific question. So if you could answer the question, please.
Does that refresh your recollection to the two calls you received from your sister on the morning of January 29th?
She may have placed those phone calls to me, but I never answered them.
You received a call from Jennifer McCabe on January 29th at 6:07:42 a.m. that lasted for 9 seconds, correct?
She may have placed a phone call to me. I never answered it. I never spoke to her that morning.
You also received a second call from your sister at 6:08:17 a.m. that lasted for 7 seconds, correct?
Objection.
Go ahead.
It says that, but I never answered a phone call from my sister Jennifer that morning.
You're aware that cell phone companies have what are called tolling records.
Sustained.
Ms. Albert, it's your testimony here today that you never spoke to your sister that morning.
I never spoke to my sister on the phone that morning.
Who else was in your bedroom?
Me and my husband.
You and Brian, only two individuals who could have answered those calls.
With only 2 people in the room, besides the dog.
At 7 a.m., someone had a 9-second call with Jennifer McCrack.
Objection.
All right, sustained. You've got more for this witness, I imagine, Ms. Little?
Yes, Your Honor.
So we'll take the luncheon recess, folks.